Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
The Herald, 13th of May. News. John Swinney, I brought back SNP from enormous peril. Exclusive by Rebecca McCurdy. John Swinney has said the SNP was on the brink of collapse before he took over as leader 2 years ago. In an exclusive interview with the Herald's Brian Taylor, the First Minister reflects on the party's fortunes days after he led the SNP to an historic fifth term in government. The SNP won 58 seats, placing them significantly ahead of Labour and Reform UK, who'd tied on 17 seats. But it did not always look so positive, with the SNP's Westminster cohort shrinking to just 9 MPs following the 2024 general election. Mr Swinney had been in government a matter of months after replacing Humza Yousaf following the collapse of the Bute House agreement with the Scottish Greens. The party was also at the centre of a police investigation into the SNP's finances, with former Chief Executive Peter Murrell ultimately charged with embezzlement. Speaking in Bute House, the First Minister told the Herald he brought the SNP back from enormous peril. I thought the SNP was in danger of collapse at that stage in 2024, he said. I thought the SNP was in such a difficult position that I absolutely had no alternative but to come back and try to restore the fortunes of the party. And that's what I've done. I've literally rescued the SNP from a position of enormous peril. He said the party was literally in a position where we had lost the focus of the public, adding it was his job to heal it. I have restored its relationship with the public, and we now find itself in a leading position that nobody in 2024 would have thought was possible, and that has come about by the focus I've had with rebuilding relationships within the party and making sure we've got good democratic governments within the party, and that most importantly we face outwards and not look inwards. Mr Swinney said his predecessors, Mr Yousaf and Ms Sturgeon, were not to blame for the challenging situations the SNP found itself in 2 years ago. Reflecting on that time, Mr Swinney said he was happy and ready to step down following 16 years in senior government positions. But having steadied the ship, Mr Swinney said he was delighted to have secured a mandate of his own. I do think how I feel today is very different to when I came into Bute House 2 years ago. I felt like I was coming in on a mandate that had been won by Nicola Sturgeon, and obviously I carry enormous regard and respect for Nicola, but I'm now here in my own right, and that's different. Exclusive by Rebecca McCurdy. Read by Gordon Brown. The Herald, 13th of May. News. Glasgow firm McFarlane warns of Middle East price hikes. By Scott Wright. The boss of a major Scottish company has warned of a sharp rise in supplier costs arising from the crisis in the Middle East as it bids to get back on track following a difficult year in 2025. McFarlane Group reported that trading in the first quarter had been encouraging as it took steps to recover from a tragic incident at its Pittreevy site in Cumbernauld that led to the loss of a member of staff in October. The protective packaging specialist said group profit in the first quarter was in line with expectations, but behind the same period in 2025. This was because of the temporary outsourcing of manufacturing from Pitreavie while operations were suspended and restructuring actions taken in the company's distribution business. McFarlane told the stock market that its performance was expected to improve during the first half as it builds on organic revenue growth momentum, benefits from new equipment installed at Pitreavie, and action to maintain strong control over operating costs. However, the company said events in the Middle East will present market challenges not anticipated at the start of the year. It has seen supplier costs rise sharply in the second quarter amid the ongoing disruption of freight through the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking after McFarlane's annual general meeting in Glasgow, at which all resolutions were passed, Chief Executive Peter Atkinson said the company was seeing a dramatic increase in the input price of polymer-based products such as stretch film and tape. Mr. Atkinson told the Herald, in terms of our first quarter results, there was no impact from the Middle East, but going into the second quarter, we will start to see the impact of those prices increasing, and then our ability to recover those prices from customers. The other thing is obviously the price of fuel, because that has impacted already. We are seeing increased fuel prices, and we've been more effective in the way we manage our deliveries to minimise the amount of miles we are doing to deliver, to reduce or minimise the amount of fuel we're using. Investors in McFarlane heard Mr. Atkinson explain how the incident at Pitreavie, which remains under investigation by the relevant authorities, had affected the company emotionally, operationally and financially. He said employee morale at the site was okay following the upheaval caused by the incident, and declared it had been heartwarming to see the Pitreavie business receive so much support from its suppliers. I think the staff have gone through what you could argue is the worst. They have clearly been very positive about the speed of which we invested in the new machinery, which is up and operational. Customers remained remarkably loyal because we were concerned that they would remain loyal but might decide to dual source, but nobody's doing that at the moment. He added, we have had a number of open days at the site to bring customers in and see the new equipment working. The next few months are going to be really important as we start to ramp up. Mr. Atkinson said the site, which McFarlane inherited with its £18 million acquisition of the Pitreavie Group in January 2025, was beginning to trade at the level of profitability it anticipated when the deal was announced. McFarlane invested £1.2 million in new machinery at Pitreavie following the incident, with the site expected to return to full capacity in the second quarter. In a statement to the stock market, McFarlane Chair Aline Gulvansan said the company's main focus for 2026 has been to commence profit recovery. Profits dropped by 28% last year to £19.6 million, with the fall attributed to the disruption caused by the Pitreavie incident, as well as headwinds faced by its dominant packaging distribution business. The first quarter saw it achieve organic growth in both its distribution and manufacturing operations. Mr. Atkinson expects the headwinds to continue this year into 2027, but highlighted the boost to sales from rising demand from the defence and aerospace sectors, as countries invest more of their GDP in defence in an increasingly uncertain world. He said McFarlane currently derives around 80% of its protective packaging revenue from the industrial sector, which includes the defence, aerospace, medical and electronics industries, and 20% from retail. However, he is overseeing a pivot by the company to the industrial sector as retail comes under pressure from regulations, such as the extended producer responsibility levy. He also said retail was more vulnerable to the shifting economic climate. As part of a wide response to cost pressures, McFarlane has reduced its headcount by around 50 roles, and more are likely to follow. This is likely to be achieved through natural wastage, with certain staff who leave the business not being replaced. The company yesterday extended the timescale to complete its £4 million share buyback programme to the end of 2026. £2.6 million had been spent by March the 31st. By Scott Wright. Read by Gordon Brown. The Herald, 13th of May. News. Liquidators appointed to Scottish Whisky Merchants Company. Exclusive by Brian Donnelly. Liquidators have been appointed to a Scottish Whisky Merchants Company. The firm collapsed into administration, plunging thousands of cask investors into uncertainty. It comes after this firm's assets were sold, and the new owner has been working to reunite casks with owners. Whisky Merchants Trading Limited has now been placed into liquidation by the administrators Griffins. It earlier said that an estimated £80 million in investor funds were raised across the collapsed firm brands, leaving thousands of global customers uncertain of their asset ownership. The administrators said the cask investment business was rescued with the sale of key assets to Edinburgh Cask Management Resolution Limited. Griffin said as part of the sale agreement, ECMR has committed to addressing the issues faced by customers who may have purchased casks from the companies but have not yet been located. They will replace these casks and offer trade-out options for better stock. Each offer will be tailored to the specific circumstances of individual customers, and ECMR will provide further details in due course. Griffins also said, additionally, ECMR has agreed to take over cask management where applicable and will work with warehouse operators to resolve outstanding warehouse fees. Warehouse keepers will enter into agreements to facilitate the transfer of casks to their rightful owners. New owner ECMR has been working over recent months to resolve debts, transfer casks, and set up verified warehouse accounts for customers. Griffin said, the company expanded rapidly, gaining investors worldwide. However, the company was not able to keep up with the increasing costs and expenses. Griffins was also liquidator to Whisky Merchants Trading Limited related companies Cask 88 Trading Pte Limited and Braeburn Whisky Pte Limited. ECMR said in an update, our focus throughout the month was on contacting all customers where casks are currently unaccounted for, ensuring every cask is properly reconciled and transferred to its rightful owner. It said it had delivered results, including clearing around £500,000 of storage debts as part of the update. A spokesperson for Griffin said liquidation is available as one of the statutory exit routes to administration once the statutory purpose of the administration has been met. In this case, this was identified as the most appropriate exit route. There is a statutory duty to give notice of the appointment by the court, and the company will continue in liquidation until any of the remaining actions in respect of the company and its claims and assets have concluded. Exclusive by Brian Donnelly. Read by Gordon Brown. The Herald, 13th of May. News. Wright's alarm is 10,480 Scots children trapped in temporary homes. Exclusive by Martin Williams. Public Health Scotland has warned that homeless people may be experiencing a human rights issue as record numbers of children remain trapped in temporary accommodation. In a stark new briefing, it warned people experiencing homelessness may not have their human rights realised and are among the groups in society facing the greatest inequalities. The analysis seen by Scottish Government officials reveals there are now 18,092 households living in temporary accommodation across Scotland, including 10,480 children, the highest level ever recorded. Officials also pointed to the World Health Organization standards, stating everyone is entitled to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, supported by services and conditions that are accessible, equitable, and free from discrimination. The national agency, designed to improve and protect the health and well-being of the nation, said homelessness and health are deeply interconnected and warned people experiencing homelessness face significant higher risks of physical and mental ill health, while poor health can also be a major contributing factor to becoming and remaining homeless. The briefing reveals the average time spent in temporary accommodation was 280 days overall, rising to 386 days for households with children. Officials warn these temporary accommodation arrangements are often prolonged and unsettling, reflecting growing pressure on councils and the wider housing system. And they warn preventing homelessness is not solely a housing issue and also requires tackling its fundamental causes, such as unequal distribution of income, power and wealth. On May the 15th, 2 years ago, then First Minister Humza Yousaf's administration formally declared a housing emergency in Scotland. The move followed sustained pressure from housing campaigners, councils and charities, who warned that supply shortages and spiralling demand were leaving thousands in temporary accommodation or trapped in unsuitable housing. The crisis has been years in the making, driven by multiple factors including rises in homelessness. In July 2024, the Herald revealed that a surge of Scots children who would fill St Andrews were declared as homeless the previous year, in a scandal that saw more than 160 die in housing limbo in Glasgow over 4 years. The Herald set out a 7-point charter for change to help Scotland's housing emergency and was credited by some for sparking a change of heart and cuts to the Scottish Government's affordable homes budget. Included a call to cut the number of children living in temporary accommodation and a significant increase in the building of affordable homes. Public Health Scotland warned those affected by homelessness face increased rates of long-term physical illness, depression, anxiety and substance use, alongside a much higher risk of death from a range of causes than the general population and a risk of dying younger. There were an estimated 231 deaths of people experiencing homelessness registered in Scotland in 2024, a rise of 48% since 2017, when 164 of those without a home were thought to have died. Around half, 49%, were people aged under 45. The health body described the figures as a particularly stark indication of the premature mortality associated with homelessness, adding that common causes including substance use, suicide and other preventable external causes. Officials also warned homelessness is both a cause and a result of social and health inequality and poverty, as growing numbers of vulnerable Scots remain trapped without stable homes. The briefing says poverty is a key driver of homelessness and warns homelessness risk is strongly patterned by poverty, especially childhood poverty. The health body said people experiencing homelessness are affected by particularly extreme health inequalities, and they warned services need to work together to prevent homelessness earlier, adding there were opportunities within the health sector, particularly mental health and substance use support services, to help prevent homelessness before people reach crisis point. Officials said a public health approach strives to stop people becoming homeless by addressing risk factors and offering support at the earliest opportunity rather than waiting until a crisis happens. The report added, early intervention is critical. Early support with housing, employment, income or specialist services such as health and social care can enable individuals to exit homelessness quickly and regain stability. Public Health Scotland also warned a human rights-based approach requires fair resource allocation, service proportionate to need, meaningful community involvement and strong accountability to ensure that everyone can access the care and support necessary to achieve good health. Housing charities have repeatedly warned lengthy stays in temporary accommodation can have severe consequences for physical health, mental well-being and child development. In some parts of the country, councils have struggled to find enough suitable accommodation amid shortages of social housing and rising demand. The report also warns people experiencing homelessness frequently face barriers that delay or prevent access to healthcare, leading to conditions becoming more severe and complex. The briefing says people can struggle to register with GPs because they do not have a permanent address, cannot safely receive correspondence, or cannot afford transport to appointments. Officials also warned many homeless people face stigma and discrimination within health services, which is linked with poorer mental and physical health outcomes. The report argues stable housing plays a major role in protecting health and preventing further harm. And Public Health Scotland warned that providing a roof is not something enough to enable someone to stay in accommodation, and the right support is crucial. Officials added, without support, maintaining tenancy and accommodation can break down, leading to cycles of repeat homelessness. Exclusive by Martin Williams. Read by Gordon Brown.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 13th of May, from the opinion section. Why more vegans are now eating Scottish wild venison. This article is by Vicky Allen. Anya Back, who runs wild venison curing business Great Glen Charcuterie, observes that these days they have some customers who are vegan. They are vegan, she says, and don't want to touch anything from the farming system, but would be happy to eat wild meat, and our charcuterie because most of our products are actually 100% wild venison. Her observation chimes with recent article in the Telegraph with the playful headline, "Venison is vegan. Even the plant munchers are admitting it." While clearly that's not entirely accurate, certainly there are plant munchers who are otherwise following a mostly vegan lifestyle, but also eating wild deer. The venison market is changing, and not just because increasing numbers of consumers are looking at it as an ethical and environmental option, since deer, which browse on young trees, hinder woodland planting and regeneration. It sits, as Ewan Ross, sales director at Highland Game, one of the UK's largest venison processors, puts it, at the intersection of premium, health, provenance and sustainable low-impact stories. Venison, he says, is high protein, nutrient-dense, naturally lean, rich in iron, and fits perfectly with modern eating habits. With around 4% of consumers in the UK now using weight loss medications, with this number is set to grow, shoppers are becoming far more conscious about the nutritional quality of the food they eat. At the same time, there is a growing consumer movement looking for better alternative proteins. Venison is shifting away from being viewed as a niche or purely seasonal game product. The dial is going in the right direction. Approximately 1 to 1.5 million shoppers are buying into venison regularly. But it's the net zero story around trees and nature restoration that seems to be gathering most steam. A recent article for the rewilding charity Scotland, The Big Picture by Hugh Webster, Could Eating More Venison Support Nature Recovery? Described the problem with deer and trees and nature. Too many hooves, Webster wrote, break up delicate peatlands, letting in oxygen and letting out carbon. Too many nibbling mouths restrict woodland regeneration and reduce biodiversity. With Scottish Government targets to bring deer densities down, a key question is how to ensure, where possible, they are used as food. Making good use of shot deer is increasingly seen as important in these times of growing food bills and insecurity. Hence, there are projects like Fair Feast, which I featured in a recent article, delivering the meat to food banks, as well as venison dealers and processors like Highland Game. Christian Nissen, managing director and founder of Highland Game, observes, "There is now greater recognition from government that deer management and venison utilization must work hand in hand. If animals are harvested, there is an expectation that the product should be used properly and sustainably." Peter Clark, Scotland Director of the British Association for Shooting and Conservation, the BASC, says, "With beef prices going up and being quite high at the moment, people are keen to try something else. The political narrative around it may be having an effect. Some people are perhaps more conscious of their food impact and would rather eat something that's wild, especially when they realize it's all part of managing the landscape and reducing emissions and helping trees grow." BASC, British Association for Shooting and Conservation, with their Eat Game initiative, is interested in telling the story around venison to people who don't already buy it and are currently on a mission to get venison into hospitals and into schools. We want public sector establishments to embrace venison. It's about normalizing it. I think if somebody handed the average person on the street a packet of beef mince and asked, "What would you make with this?" people probably say spaghetti bolognese. But if you handed them venison mince, they would probably say, "Oh, I don't know." Actually, the answer could be exactly the same: spaghetti bolognese. But one of the biggest issues around venison is that it is seasonal. Delivering venison year-round is a challenge, since its shooting is permitted within seasonal limits, meaning that the majority of harvesting takes place between October and March, during the traditional wild harvesting season. Though more flexible deer management approaches and additional licensing have helped improve availability outside traditional peak season, wild venison remains fundamentally seasonal. Highland Game has found its own way of getting round the seasonality issue. Around 80% of its throughput takes place between October and March, and outside that period, raw material availability tightens considerably, and high-quality farmed venison is imported from New Zealand. More recently, increased demand for venison has put still more pressure on the system. Historically, surplus wild venison harvested during the season would be frozen and sold throughout the summer months. That buffer, Highland Game say, is now disappearing. "In the past, we had excess product available during the season," says Nissen. "Today, demand is so strong that much of the available product is sold immediately, leaving far less stock available for later in the year." Nissen says the issue is now one of quality supply rather than consumer demand. "We are short of quality product," he says plainly. Demand for high-quality venison continues to grow, but not everybody fully understands what is required to consistently produce the quality needed for retail and food service markets. Despite extended licensing and out-of-season harvesting permissions, Nissen believes the industry will remain heavily weighted towards autumn production. There are many biological and practical reasons why the majority of harvesting takes place in autumn and winter. I do not see that fundamentally changing. Ewan Ross sees seasonality not as a weakness, but as a marketing advantage. Consumers increasingly value seasonality and provenance, he says. That gives venison a genuine point of difference. When the product is at its absolute best during the autumn and winter months, that is when we should celebrate it. As part of that strategy, Highland Game is developing a premium seasonal range with a major UK retailer, focused on different deer species and higher-end cuts, available only between October and March. Scottish quality wild venison approved. Right now, venison is out of season, but we can look forward to the winter, when it will be virtually vegan, depending on your definition of the term. That article was by Vicky Allen.
A further selection of letters from today's Herald on Thursday, the 14th of May 2026, in the opinion section. Our first letter, First Minister ignoring complaints. While John Swinney was busy lecturing the Prime Minister on listening, he might not have noticed that the Borders and the Highlands were providing an emphatic message that he has not been listening to us. We are saying that we're fed up with ever more wind turbines destroying Scottish landscapes, harming communities and the environment. In the Highlands, Kate Forbes and Marie Todd listened so little that their SNP constituency seats were lost, and Emma Roddick's coat is on a sugary peg. The SNP's Energy Minister, Gillian Martin, had over 100 meetings with energy developers in the past 5 years, but gave only half an hour to listening to a convention of local communities. Mr. Swinney's hypocrisy is staggering. Enough is enough. Peter Dunn, Bewley. And finally, don't look back. John Swinney says people have got to move on over Sinn Féin. Exclusive interview, The Herald, May 13. Does this mean he and his party will move on over their lost 2014 referendum? Duncan Suman, Mulgai. That concludes the selection from today's letters. This article is from the Herald on Thursday, the 14th of May, 2026. It is found in the opinion section and the headline is, I've ditched social media and I fear what comes next even more. And the report is by Neil Mackay. I confess my bias from the get-go. I hate technology. Not all technology, I hasten to add. I don't hate heart machines, radios, sat-navs or solar panels. The technology I hate is Californian. It masquerades as entertainment, but it's really a social crowbar, jimmying apart society. It's owned by billionaires. It makes our lives worse, not better. That's the technology I hate, AI and social media. If artificial intelligence was used for what its creators intended, better cancer diagnosis, improving transport and logistics, and monitoring the planet's health, I'd be blowing party horns. Instead, it's flattening culture, killing jobs, and turning people into morons who fall in love with chatbots. Indeed, there's a similarity between my hatred and that of a spurned lover. I've always thought it rather inaccurate to describe folk born from 1981 onwards, millennials, Generation Z, Gen Alpha, as digital natives. It was in my generation, Generation X, that the cult of technology took root. We grew up on Ataris and ZX spectrums. We became the first generation to work in computerised offices. When I joined a city newspaper in 1991 as a cub reporter, the last typewriter had just been ditched. My generation became the tech optimists of the 1990s, proselytising about this cool new thing, the internet. My lot launched the first digital startups. Sadly, it's now my lot ruining the world with big tech. Google's founder, Larry Page, is 53 and Elon Musk, 55. I once loved technology. I believed it promised utopia. From age 7 to my mid-40s, I bought every gadget going. By 2015, however, I realised how wrong I'd been. Today, I'm effectively a Luddite. Old Ned Ludd, the legendary first smasher of machines, is my hero. If, like Ned, I could destroy the technology that's wrecking our lives, I would. But where the hell is the internet's off button? Tell me, and I'll flick it. In the last year, I've dumped most social media. Twitter and Facebook are gone. I've bought an old brick-style phone, which I use when I'm going out. I need an iPhone for work. I can't escape technology completely, but the damn thing doesn't come with me when I'm socialising. Any new technology I view with instant suspicion. Not that you require a conspiratorial mindset to fear the latest monstrosities emanating from Silicon Valley's digital labs. The warning klaxons, red flags and hazard signs are unmissable. We're about to suffer another wave of social horror as smart glasses go overground, thanks to mega corporations like, you guessed it, Google and Meta, which runs Facebook. Back when I still thought tech cool and utopian, smart glasses were just too expensive, so they didn't take off. That's changed. This week it emerged that millions will be sold in coming years. Smart glasses take the dystopia of the screen out onto the street. I can film you without your knowledge. Employees can be surveyed. Women can be filmed in clubs, at beaches and gyms. Children can be recorded at play parks. This technology allows everyone to be a spy or pervert. Even the so-called positives are desperately dark. One selling point is that you can listen to podcasts and music while wearing smart glasses. All that means, though, is that we'll cocoon ourselves away from each other even more. The world feels half dead already as people isolate in their headphones and gaze silently into their Samsungs. With smart glasses, we'll all be walking around in a self-curated zombie state. So add sad loners to spies and perverts. Or there's this sales pitch. You don't need to pull out your phone anymore to take pictures. Just use your smart glasses. Is it really such a chore to remove a plastic box the size of your hand from your pocket and take a picture with it? Actually, do you really need to take a picture of every single thing you see in the world rather than experiencing it as a real flesh and blood human being? With smart glasses, we'll live permanently behind screens, and the screen does something bad to people. We even see it with driving and the car. Put a decent person behind a windscreen and watch them turn into a Tasmanian devil, ready to run over Granny who doesn't cross the road fast enough. The phone and computer screen turned us into monsters who predate on each other. The screen allowed the old poison pen letter writer to come out from under their bridge and enter the world as the internet's dominant species, the troll. Social researchers have found that most online posts that are threatening or abusive come from low IQ folk with personality disorders. Now we're going to put smart glasses on them and let them loose in the world. So add semi-literate psychopaths to sad loners, spies and perverts. Ironically, given Generation X's role in the rise of evil tech, folk of my vintage may have childhood memories which help put smart glasses in context. When I was a kid, I read American horror comics like Creepy Tales. At the back were adverts. I sent away for sea monkeys and was disgusted to receive a bunch of water bugs rather than cool little dancing aqua people. There was another dodgy advert. It was for X-ray specs. The ad featured a guy ogling a woman in see-through clothes. It was the 1970s, so she looked like Barbara Windsor in a baby doll nightdress, if I recall. That's smart glasses. We know that any possible good which comes from smart glasses, and there doesn't seem to be much good beyond listening to podcasts and not having to use your arms to lift your phone and take a picture, will be as nothing compared to the social ills. We're going to have story after story soon of women being stalked, children filmed, and citizens surveilled. But it's all cool, right? The tech bros create growth, and growth is all that matters, even if the growth is in their wallets, not ours. Here's one solution, and there's nothing smart or gimmicky to it. Just don't buy these cursed things. They are a modern version of the monkey's paw. Leave smart glasses on the shelf. You don't need them. Unless, of course, you're a psychopath, sad loner, spy, or pervert. That report was by Neil Mackay. This article is from the Herald on Thursday, the 14th of May, 2026. It is found in the opinion section, and the headline is Scottish Labour needs to get rid of Anna Sarwar and Jackie Baillie. And the report is by Kevin McKenna. As the siege of Sir Keir Starmer has proceeded, the failures of Labour's Scottish leadership have escaped scrutiny. When do the members start to become angry about being reduced to 17 seats? After Tuesday's cabinet meeting at 10 Downing Street, a procession of loyalists dutifully sallied forth to shore up Sir Keir Starmer's crumbling authority. Among them was Jim Murphy, the former Scottish Labour leader. Mr Murphy now runs a political lobbying firm which scavenges for business within the orbit of Sir Keir's premiership. Since Sir Keir became party leader, Mr Murphy's firm has become a multi-million-pound enterprise operating for a global clientele. The former MP delivered an eloquent and assured defence of Sir Keir and warned of the consequences of removing the Prime Minister. There are two dangers here, said Mr Murphy. It leads to a period of political instability, and that means there's a loss of investor confidence. We'll see what the bond markets do today and in the next couple of days. None of these cheerleaders said anything about how Labour becoming disconnected from working class communities. The class word is now treated in Labour circles with the same horror that the House Un-American Activities Committee viewed socialism during the McCarthy witch hunts. As Mr Murphy was fretting about the bond markets, I recalled my interview earlier this year with Brian Leishman, Labour MP for Alloa and Grangemouth. Mr Leishman is routinely described as left-wing, a term that's deployed subtly to invalidate anything he might say. All Labour MPs should be left-wing if we understand this to be adopting a position informed by the needs of disadvantaged communities. If the Labour Party isn't speaking for the people who live in these places, then they are entirely without purpose. Mr Leishman recalled meeting a group of young reform activists who were canvassing locally for votes. He spoke kindly about them, describing them as working-class lads who were happy to chat with the MP about why they now felt their interests were best served by Nigel Farage. They'd simply felt that Labour no longer represented them and were deaf to their concerns. I love this party, but we're miles off where I think we should be. In Scotland, politics has become totally dominated by yes or no. What depresses me about up here and at Westminster is that there's a paucity of politicians who talk about class. Yet, class is at the heart of every political decision made in this country, and I don't understand why so many of my lot shy away from it. If the Labour Party in Scotland could get to a position where we focus relentlessly on class issues, then we could shift the narrative here and change our fortunes. Is the Labour Party at UK level and in Scotland bold enough to do that right now? Absolutely not. Yet, there was nothing in Labour's Scottish election manifesto that offered the prospect of transformational change. There were no detailed policies addressing the inequalities that cause multi-deprivation in hundreds of Scottish towns. No child would be lifted out of poverty by what Scottish Labour was pledging. There were promises to provide more classroom assistants and specialist teachers, more apprenticeships, and making childcare more affordable. It was a list of running repairs rather than a detailed multi-agency policy targeting the causes and effects of 24/7 poverty. There was nothing that offered long-term hope for these people. There was no industrial strategy where tax levers could be pulled and incentives created to preserve and provide long-term jobs. Tax isn't a necessary evil. It's the means by which equal opportunity is achieved. You might have imagined that the abject failure of Scotland's political establishment to devise a plan to save oil refining jobs at Grangemouth might have been a wake-up call to Scottish Labour and formed the basis of some future-proofing. They could have devised a workforce training strategy to replace Scotland's great education swindle, shoehorning young people into higher education degree courses worth nothing more than a framed picture on the mantelpiece with cloaks and pointy hats. A real policy would be providing incentives to businesses to train and pay young Scots in building and manufacturing. It's perverse that the best practice examples of this are happening at Scotstoun and Rosyth, where old skills are being revived to build warships. Why has no Scottish Government implemented a scheme whereby the best head teachers are offered incentives to commit 10 years of their careers to schools in Scotland's most disadvantaged communities, and then be freed to ditch the failed curriculum for excellence and devise strategies shaped by the specific challenges in their neighbourhoods, throw out holistic and flexible, and replace them with real and practical? Why has Scottish Labour failed to devise a strategy for dismantling Reform's wretched propaganda about refugees and asylum seekers? This was done successfully in Glasgow more than 30 years ago, but only because local politicians joined the police and charities to visit these communities, listened to local concerns, and repudiated the lies of the far right. To achieve this, though, Labour politicians would need to immerse themselves in these communities, rather than attending champagne receptions at Holyrood, organised by Scotland's multi-million-pound lobbying sector. Where was the commitment to persuading the UK to support long-term oil and gas exploration in the North Sea and to oppose the Scottish Greens' war on jobs? Where was the bold plan to implement a national house-building programme? Instead of indulging John Swinney's worthless symposiums to combat reform and the far right, why was there no housing convention bringing lenders, builders and governments together to make this happen? Where's the strategy to tilt the local government procurement process in favour of local companies? Labour has now been reduced to a rump of just 17 seats. It has the status of a village bowling club committee. Once, they could have been held to account by Scotland's trade unionists. The STUC, though, is now dominated by middle-class flag wavers, hollowed out by luxury beliefs, and led by a millionaire property developer. They're not fit for purpose either. So far, Labour's Scottish leadership team of Anas Sarwar and Jackie Baillie have been spared scrutiny in the Keir Starmer psychodrama. Over 5 successive Scottish elections, Labour support has followed an uninterrupted downward trajectory. Mr Sarwar, as leader, has had 2 shots at halting that trend. He and his party remain miles off it. It's surely now time for the Labour membership and its elected politicians to consider changing the management. They need to start getting nasty for the poor and bring back the thunder. That report was by Kevin McKenna. The following letters are from a selection on the opinion page in the Herald on Thursday, the 26th of May, 2026. Our first letter headline, Talking Turkey, Voting Reform Needed but Won't Happen. There has been much comment about the election of Dr. Q Manivannan as an MSP, an Indian citizen who holds a student visa granting temporary residence rights in Scotland. Scotland's first transgender MSP clarifies visa situation after online backlash, the Herald, May 12th. It transpires that in 2024, the Scottish Parliament, in a unanimous vote, extended candidacy rights to non-UK citizens, including those with limited leave to remain. To me, this seems a very poor decision. Ross Greer, co-leader of the Scottish Greens, responded angrily to criticism of the situation on the basis that Dr. Manivannan had been legitimately elected. While that is technically correct, it does beg a question around the regional party list system. I wonder how many of the 67,877 electors who voted Green in the Edinburgh and Lothian's East regional list were aware of there being a candidate by the name of Q Manivannan, far less knew anything about the individual. Reform of the voting system for Scottish parliamentary elections is badly needed, but the likelihood of SNP and Green parties supporting a review is in Turkey's voting for Christmas territory. George Rennie, Inverness. Compulsory voting required. I agree with Walter Paul, letters May 8, that voting should not be an option, but should in fact be compulsory. In the light of the results for the Scottish Parliament, I feel it is even more crucial that all those eligible to vote exercise that right without exception. The number of people eligible to vote in Scotland is, according to recently released figures, 3.8 million. Turnout in this election has been declared at 53.2%, which equates to 1.8 million people who could not be bothered to vote for varying reasons. This means that the SNP, which took the majority 58 seats, equating to 38.2% of the constituency vote of those who voted, in fact only achieved support from 19% of the total electorate. We now have the situation where, for the next 5 years, 81% of the population is being governed by a party whose policies and philosophy they don't support. This makes John Swinney's quote that the win was significant and emphatic debatable, to say the least. Remove this sizable bone of contention by making voting compulsory, either in person, by post or online, with no exceptions. If you don't want to vote for any party on the ballot paper, it would be quite acceptable to spoil your paper. But not taking part would not be an option and would be subject to a fine, as is the case in Australia, for example. For future politicians who win an election to state accurately that the population has spoken, this boil must be lanced. James Martin, Bearsden.
From the Herald, News section, Monday the 18th of May. Ministry of Defence boats rescue young canoeists from Scots Loch. Written by Donald Erskine. Ministry of Defence, MOD boats, rescued a group of young canoeists from a loch after they got into difficulty. The group of 10 were rescued from Loch Long by MOD police boats after raising the alarm to the Coast Guard. Helensburgh Coast Guard team were originally called to assist the canoeists near Ardentini after they got into difficulty due to strong winds, but had issued a pan-pan call to the MOD boats at the same time. A MOD boat assisted and all of the young canoeists were brought safely ashore and the Coast Guard stepped down. A RNLI Helensburgh spokesperson said, on Tuesday, May 12th, the Coast Guard requested the launch of the lifeboat following a 999 call. The caller had reported that 10 young canoeists were in difficulty in the vicinity of Ardentini. The canoeists had been hit by a strong gust of wind which had scattered the group. The Coast Guard also issued a pan-pan call to any MOD police boats in the area. The lifeboat was stood down at 11:50 am after an MOD police boat reported all canoeists were safely ashore. Written by Donald Erskine and read by Billy Gordon.
From the Herald, Monday, 18th May 2026, Sports section. Derek McInnes gives first interview since Celtic defeat. By Josh McCarthy, sports writer. Heart of Midlothian head coach Derek McInnes has given his first interview since narrowly missing out on the Scottish Premiership title. McInnes' side were within minutes of creating history at Celtic Park after Lawrence Shankland had given them the lead in the first half. After winning the Scottish Football Writers Association William Hill Manager of the Year, McInnes reflected positively on the campaign, but admitted Hearts will also have a grievance over how things ultimately unfolded. In the cold light of day, when we look back, there's been so much positivity from where we were at the beginning of the season, he said. You always start a season with hope and expectation, and I think we've exceeded all of that this season. So the intention now is to dust ourselves down, try and enjoy a break, but be ready for the challenges ahead. I fully believe that those challenges are going to be met with the enthusiasm from everybody at the club, the desire to improve and go on and try and be the norm for us, to be challenging and trying to be competing for trophies on a much more regular basis. I firmly believe that those expectations will be met as we go on. So I think this season gave us much encouragement for us to reach 80 points, be involved in the Champions League qualifiers coming up in July, a club record, and so many positives from the campaign. We'll look back and enjoy it, but we'll also have the kind of grievance at times and that disappointment to try and spur us on to something greater. Hearts finished second in the Scottish top flight and will enter the second round of a Champions League qualifying this summer. There will be more expected of us next season, and rightly so, McInnes said, but I do think it will give us even more belief and confidence with what we're doing. I think the team played with a real attitude to win the season, which really has been demonstrated so often, and that pleases me no end. And we have to be that and a wee bit more again if we can go and try and lift some silverware. Hopefully we've given enough encouragement to so many other teams of what can be done. But I think if your whole club is operating well from top to bottom, and we've got that at the minute, we're still not awash with money and we have to use what we've got wisely. But I think what we have got is expertise, plenty of enthusiasm, and a real desire to drive this club on. So with all that in the mix, then we're hopeful and confident that we can keep progressing. Even saying we have Champions League football to come just feels brilliant. Just being involved in that, and we'll look forward to it when it comes around. It's important we have a rest over the summer, but we also need to be busy and try to help the squad deal with these sort of games, and we'll be determined when the game comes around, the Champions League qualifier, to try and make the most of that. I mean, it's obviously a long way into the Champions League from where we are, but we're in it. Anyway, and we're in the fight, so I think it'll be exciting for the club when that date comes around. That article was by Josh McCafferty. From the Herald, Monday, 18th May 2026, Sports Section. Monday's briefing. Hammers left teetering on brink after defeat at Newcastle, by PA News Agency. West Ham were left teetering on the brink of Premier League relegation after a damaging defeat at Newcastle. Xabi Alonso was announced as Chelsea's new manager, while Manchester United boss Michael Carrick expects an imminent resolution on his future. Elsewhere, Police Scotland promised a robust and swift response to any criminal acts committed during a pitch invasion at Celtic's dramatic William Hill Premiership title decider against Hearts. West Ham's Premier League survival bid was left hanging by a thread, following a 3-1 loss at Newcastle. With just one game remaining, the 18th placed Hammers sit 2 points from safety, and we will be relegated before hosting Leeds on the final day of the season if fellow strugglers Tottenham win at Chelsea on Tuesday evening. Will Osula scored twice for the Magpies on a chastening afternoon for Nuno Espirito Santo's side at St James's Park, after Nick Wilfmade opened the scoring. Substitute Taddy Castellanos reduced the deficit with an eye-catching finish, but it counted for little, as West Ham languish on the brink of returning to the Championship for the first time since 2012. Alonso targets trophies at Chelsea. Xabi Alonso set his sights on silverware after agreeing to lead Chelsea into a new chapter. The former Liverpool favourite is returning to the Premier League, but not at Anfield, as many predicted he eventually would. Instead, he's agreed to take the managerial reins at Stamford Bridge, where he's expected to enjoy considerable powers rather than being confined to a coaching brief. He begins a 4-year contract on July the 1st and will arrive in London with lofty ambitions. We want to build a team capable of competing consistently at the highest level and fighting for trophies, he said. There's great talent in the squad and huge potential at this football club, and it will be my great honour to lead it. Michael Carrick predicts clarity will come soon. Manchester United manager Michael Carrick expects to see his future resolved swiftly, as he edges ever closer to a long-term shot at one of the biggest jobs in the game. Carrick took charge at the final home match of his temporary stint on Sunday, seeing off Nottingham Forest 3-2 to cement third place, before addressing the Old Trafford crowd directly. The 44-year-old has enjoyed strong on-field results and impressed the club's ownership since taking over from Ruben Amorim in January, with confirmation of a deal the next logical step. Reports suggest a 2-year deal with the option of a third on the table. Over the coming days there will be clarity in the situation, said Carrick. Police promised to act after Celtic Park pitch invasion. Police Scotland vowed there will be a robust and swift response to any criminal acts committed during a pitch invasion by Celtic supporters after their team's dramatic Premiership title decider against Hearts. Hundreds of Celtic fans streamed onto the playing surface when Callum Osmond netted in the 8th minute of stoppage time to put the Hoops 3-1 ahead and effectively seal the championship. Several ran towards Hearts players. The Edinburgh club noted deeply disturbing reports of serious physical and verbal abuse towards our players and staff, both on the pitch and elsewhere, adding that the episode embarrassed Scottish football. Assistant Chief Constable Mark Sutherland told the Press Association, if any player, or if indeed any member of the public has been assaulted on that pitch, there is criminality. We will take robust and swift action. What's on today? Arsenal could make a major step towards a first Premier League title in 22 years at home to relegated Burnley. That article was by PA News Agency.
From the Herald, Scotland, Monday the 18th of May 2026, from the opinion section. Brexit hymn sheets of Swinney and Starmer so very different. Article written by Ian McConnell, Group Business Editor. John Swinney and Sir Keir Starmer both addressed the same big issue last week. However, while both in essence expressing pro-European sentiments, the hymn sheets from which they were singing could hardly have been more different, writes Ian McConnell. Brexit has been in focus in the last week, north and south of the border. Under pressure, Sir Keir Starmer went big on Europe last Monday in a major speech which was somewhat overshadowed by speculation over his future as Prime Minister. And his focus was interesting, given how timid Labour was on Brexit for so long. Sadly, Labour's red lines of not taking the UK back into the European Union, single market, or even the customs union remain, at least for now, and they basically prevent the ongoing damage of Brexit being mitigated in any meaningful macroeconomic sense. Meanwhile, First Minister John Swinney, in an exclusive interview with Brian Taylor for the Herald, which provided fascinating content across a raft of topics, homed in on Brexit when he was asked about his strategy on an independence referendum. Sir Keir declared last Monday, "The last government was defined by breaking our relationship with Europe. This Labour government will be defined by rebuilding our relationship with Europe, by putting Britain at the heart of Europe, so that we are stronger on the economy, stronger on trade, stronger on defence." This sentiment was good to hear, but what about those red lines? Asked if this meant he might abandon the red lines on Europe in Labour's manifesto published ahead of the July 2024 general election, Sir Keir replied, "I strongly believe we've got to turn our back on the arguments of the past, not open old grievances, but look forward together to how we make this country stronger, how we make this country fairer, and so that's the approach that I will take." This was perhaps better than an unequivocal no to the question, followed by the type of determined restatement of the red lines we have seen in the past. However, the not open old grievances did not appear to offer that much hope of that obliteration of the red lines that is so desperately needed. The European Movement UK Cross-Party Campaign Group declared last Monday, while the PM's pro-European rhetoric is welcome, he can't achieve his policy aims within his own red lines. You can't be at the heart of Europe, and you can't restore hope for future generations without being in the EU, at the heart of its single market, and at the table when the big calls are made. My column in the Herald on Wednesday observed, "The fact of the matter is that Labour cannot seize the step-change opportunity for the UK economy if its red lines remain, with rejoining the single market absolutely crucial and regaining EU membership most desirable." Mr Swinney brought up Brexit when Brian Taylor asked him about an apparent change of strategy regarding an independence referendum, when the First Minister flagged a parliamentary majority there for independence, having before the election highlighted an overall SNP majority as a route to securing a second referendum. While the SNP won by far the most seats in a Scottish Parliament election, it fell short of an overall majority. The First Minister, who described the UK government as intransigent on the matter of a second independence referendum, said, "My mechanism was to break the logjam, but what I've now got to do is to find another way of breaking the logjam, because winning independence is part of the whole reasoning of my politics and what drives me. Because I think Scotland, and as I look at the situation we face, the hardship that members of the public are facing just now, a lot of that has been caused because of Brexit, which is an issue inextricably linked to the decisions of the United Kingdom against the will of the people of Scotland. Independence sorts that out. It addresses that and enables Scotland to be part of the European Union." What is particularly remarkable is that Sir Keir and Mr Swinney, while in essence both expressing pro-European sentiments, are about as far away from singing from the same hymn sheet as you could imagine. Whatever people's views on the Scottish constitutional question, Mr Swinney's point about Brexit being against the will of the people of Scotland is a numerical fact. In Scotland, a very significant majority, 62%, voted to remain in the EU in the June 2016 referendum. And what is also plain, putting politics to one side, is the UK as a whole continues to suffer huge and ongoing damage from Brexit. As my column in the Herald observed, as we look at the UK now from a purely economic perspective, and putting aside whatever political impediments might be perceived by a Labour government seemingly terrified of telling the Brexiters they were wrong and upsetting those red wool voters, rejoining the single market would be an enormous boost. Such a move, bringing with it the return of free movement of people and frictionless trade between the UK and European Economic Area, would provide a step change in the UK's fortunes. And it is the only economic policy that could deliver such a huge boost in short order to output and living standards. This is clearly an issue for now and the future, not a past one like the Brexiters would try to have people believe. Sir Keir was not a Brexiter in late 2019, arguing eloquently against the folly. However, Labour's red lines mean it has embraced the key elements of the Tory hard Brexit, the loss of free movement and the ending of frictionless trade. It was good to hear Sir Keir talk about putting Britain at the heart of Europe last Monday. However, it is impossible to see how the Labour government thinks it can do that with those red lines. That article was written by Ian McConnell and read to you by Elizabeth. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 18th of May 2026, from the opinion section. Power up, Britain. Energy plan promises jobs and lower bills. Article written by Dan McGrail. As recent global events have shown, energy has repeatedly been caught up in global conflicts and geopolitical tensions, leaving millions of people and businesses worse off. It squeezes budgets, puts strain on economic output, and drives inflation. When prices spike overseas, the British public pay. This country now faces a choice. Does it want to be a price taker or a price maker? The solution is to rapidly scale up our homegrown energy generating assets and accelerate the country's journey to becoming a price maker. It means taking back control of our energy system, managing the generation and distribution of electricity and the wide-ranging benefits that come with it. That's why 12 months ago, Great British Energy, Britain's first publicly owned energy company, was created with a clear mandate for change. The British public now have a clean energy champion, charged with accelerating the rollout of cleaner, more affordable and more secure power. That starts with backing the industries needed to bring about the changes in our energy system. Our Energy Engineered in the UK programme will boost the UK's manufacturing capabilities and unblock supply chains. We believe that energy is a cure to the UK's deindustrialisation. Our programme will support technologies across the energy sector through grants, funds and market interventions to help us make bold and deliberate choices that rebuild industrial strength at home. By 2030, our goal is to support at least 10,000 jobs, with a focus on areas that have traditionally been dependent on fossil fuel industries. I have seen the transformative effects of stimulating industry and the benefits it can bring to towns and cities. This is about industry creating a place and supporting a community. I was pleased our first investment was in the Pentland offshore wind farm in the north of Scotland, which is expected to create and support more than 1,000 jobs throughout construction and operation. This is also why we have been working hard on laying the foundations for local power. In our local power plan, we've committed to supporting at least 1,000 local and community energy projects over the next 5 years. This is an unprecedented opportunity for neighbourhoods to own and benefit from the clean energy transition, and really help to reshape how we think about energy ownership. All this work has been delivered while continuing to build our organisation from the ground up. The year ahead is about turning momentum into legacy. As we open our permanent headquarters in Aberdeen, anchoring us in the UK's energy capital, we move decisively into our next chapter. We have a clear plan to deliver on our promises. We'll build new partnerships, continue to back onshore and offshore projects, and deliver a suite of resources for local and community energy groups. And that's just for starters. Our strategic plan is designed for 5 years of growth in onshore, offshore, local and supply chain activities. We have been set the unprecedented task of becoming the UK's first publicly owned energy company. 12 months ago, every decision was new. There was no playbook, only a promise to the public. Our first year demonstrates how we're earning that trust and delivering on a cleaner, more secure energy system, one that isn't at the mercy of foreign interference or actions, and is about creating energy independence for the UK and stable prices for the British public. The UK now has an energy champion in Great British Energy, and one that will deliver jobs, growth and prosperity to communities up and down the country. Dan McGrail is CEO of Great British Energy. The article was read to you by Elizabeth.
From Herald, Scotland, 18th of May 2026, from the Arts and Culture section. Royal Conservatoire of Scotland to honour leading cultural figures. Article by Craig Williams. A world-renowned choreographer and dance pioneer, one of Europe's most distinguished musicians and an expert on Bach, and a key figure in Scotland's cultural sector, will be honoured at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland's summer graduation. Christopher Bruce, CBE, long associated with the Rambert Dance Company, and conductor, organist and harpsichordist John Butt, OBE, will receive honorary doctorates in dance and music respectively on Thursday, July the 2nd. Culture advocate and arts leader Roberta Doyle will be awarded a fellowship in recognition of her strategic contribution to the development of Scotland's cultural life. The trio will join around 300 students graduating across music, drama, dance, production, film and education at Scotland's National Conservatoire, one of the world's top institutions for performing arts training. Professor Geoffrey Sharkey, Principal of the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, said, "We are proud to recognise 3 individuals who have each made a significant impact on the arts. Christopher Bruce's work has shaped contemporary dance for decades, while John Butt has transformed how we understand and perform some of the most important music of the 17th and 18th centuries. Both have also made a lasting impression on our students through their work here at RCS. During her entire career, Roberta Doyle has excelled as a champion of the arts and the wider creative sector. She has been a powerful advocate for the difference they make to the well-being of individuals and communities, as well as to the community of cities, regions and nations. Roberta has long been outstanding in her support of so many cultural organisations in Glasgow, across Scotland and the UK, both professionally and as a non-executive, and in everything she does, her passion for the arts, for artists, and for their transformative power shines through. Known for using dance to engage with social and political issues, Christopher Bruce, CBE, is one of the most influential choreographers of the modern era, whose work bridges the gap between classical ballet and contemporary dance. Mr. Bruce trained at the Ballet Rambert School and joined Ballet Rambert in 1963, where he was acclaimed as one of the most gifted performers of his generation and recognised as the last major choreographer to have been nurtured by Marie Rambert. In addition to performing and choreographing, he was Associate Director of the Ballet Rambert from 1975 to 1979 and Associate Choreographer from 1980 to 1986. In 1994, he returned to the company as Artistic Director, a role he held until 2002. In 2025, he visited the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland to coach BA Modern Studies in excerpts from his work Rooster and Ghost Dances. Mr. Bruce said, "I could not be more delighted to have been nominated for an honorary doctorate by the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. I feel truly honoured." John Butt, OBE, is an internationally acclaimed musician, conductor and scholar. Renowned for his work on 17th and 18th century music and historical performance practice, a leading authority on Bach, he has authored major publications and built an award-winning discography. In 2024, Mr. Butt conducted the RCAS opera production of Idomeneo and will return for Così fan tutte, the first co-presentation between Scottish Opera and RCS's new Advanced Artist Diploma in Opera programme. He said, "I am extraordinarily honoured to receive an honorary doctorate from the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. I was determined to build links when I arrived at the University of Glasgow in 2001, and I'm delighted to have had an increasingly strong connection with the RCS over the last few years, particularly with the current partnership with the Dunedin Consort." Mr. Butt was Gardiner Professor of Music at the University of Glasgow, where he continues as an honorary professorial research fellow. He has appeared at major festivals, including the BBC Proms and the Edinburgh International Festival, and has conducted many of the world's leading orchestras. Roberta Doyle is a senior UK cultural industry figure with in-depth experience of strategic management, organisational business, and corporate planning and governance. She has held director-level roles in external affairs, audiences, marketing, communications and media, digital, learning community and fundraising within Scotland's largest cultural organisations, including most recently as Director of External Affairs with the National Theatre of Scotland, the same role for Scottish Opera, and the post of Director of Public Affairs with the National Galleries of Scotland. Ms. Doyle has significant high-level governance experience serving on such boards as Scottish Opera, the Tron Theatre, where she is the chair, the Donald Dewar Arts Award and the Sison Foundation. She said, "The Royal Conservatoire of Scotland is one of the top performing arts institutions in the world, and to be recognised with a fellowship is an honour indeed. I am delighted to be awarded the fellowship, which I will proudly accept in tribute to every single person, past, present and future, whose talents and energies, no matter what their role, contribute to the extraordinary arts and cultural landscape of Scotland." And that article was written by Craig Williams.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 19th of May from the news section. Bomb squad sent in after grenade found in Renfrew Garden. This article is by Jodie Harrison. A police bomb squad has carried out a controlled explosion in a Scottish town after a suspected hand grenade was found in a garden. Officers were sent to the property in the Broadloan area of Renfrew at 7:30 p.m. on Monday night after the alarm was raised. The Explosive Ordnance Disposal, the EOD team, were called and removed the device. Around 5:30 a.m. on Tuesday, 19th of May, it was destroyed via a controlled explosion at a safe location nearby. A cordon was put in place and no evacuations were required. Police Scotland said in a statement, a controlled explosion has taken place in the Broadloan area of Renfrew following the discovery of a possible unexploded hand grenade. Around 7:30 p.m. on Monday the 18th of May 2026, we were made aware of the item being found in a garden in the town. The EOD attended and removed the item. Around 5:30 a.m. on Tuesday 19th May, it was destroyed via a controlled explosion at a safe location nearby. That article was by Jodie Harrison and read by Karen. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 19th of May from the news section. Firefighters at scene of Ladybank landfill site blaze 7 days on. This article is by Jodie Harrison. Firefighters remain at the scene of a landfill site blaze 7 days after it broke out. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service said that crews would remain at the scene of the fire at Ladybank in Fife for some time. The deep-seated blaze at Ladybank Waste Facility near Lower Melville Wood erupted last week. At its height, 12 appliances and dozens of firefighters were at the scene, while large clouds of smoke could be seen drifting over the countryside. The SFRS said firefighters had been working tirelessly since the alarm was raised at 13:35 last Tuesday. Area Commander Lee Turnock said the fire was under control, but urged people living in the surrounding area to follow public safety advice. The fire has spread across an area of recycling material and waste measuring about 200 metres, 218 yards, by 300 metres, or 328 yards. 2 fire appliances and a high-tech reach vehicle remained at the scene on Monday, the SFRS said. And they warned that, although the fire was now under control, smoke could travel a significant distance depending on weather conditions and wind direction. While the fire is now under control, this remains a complex and protracted incident due to the deep-seated nature of the fire and the volume of material involved, Turnock told BBC Scotland. People in surrounding areas may continue to notice smoke coming from the site as firefighters carry out damping down pockets of fire. We would ask residents to follow public safety advice, including keeping windows and doors closed and limiting time outdoors where smoke is present. That article was by Jodie Harrison and read by Karen. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 19th of May from the news section. UK jobless rate rises as vacancies slump to lowest level in 5 years. This article is by Jodie Harrison. Britain's rate of unemployment has unexpectedly risen as vacancies slumped to their lowest level for 5 years amid a sharp pullback in hiring across under-pressure retail and hospitality sectors, according to official figures. The Office for National Statistics, the ONS, said the jobless rate rose to 5% in the 3 months to March, up from 4.9% in the 3 months to February. Most economists had expected the rate to remain unchanged. The ONS estimated the number of workers on UK payrolls also slumped by 100,000 during April, which is the largest fall since May 2020 at the start of the COVID pandemic, though these figures are subject to revision. It said vacancies dropped by 28,000 quarter on quarter to 705,000 in the 3 months to April, which is the lowest level since the same period in 2021. Regular earnings growth, meanwhile, also fell back further to 3.4% in the first quarter, down from 3.6% in the 3 months to February, only just outpacing consumer prices index inflation by 0.3%. Liz McKeown, ONS Director of Economic Statistics, said, "Latest figures suggest the labour market remains soft, with vacancies at their lowest level in 5 years and unemployment higher than a year ago." She added, "Lower-paying sectors such as hospitality and retail have seen some of the largest falls in vacancies and payroll numbers, both in recent months and over the last year." Work and Pensions Secretary Pat McFadden said unemployment figures are encouraging amid the impact of the Iran war on the labour market. He said today's figures show there were 416,000 more people in work than there was this time last year. While this is encouraging, we know the conflict in the Middle East is casting a shadow on the labour market. However, thanks to the choices we have made, we are in a stronger position to deal with the continuing volatility and costs of the war in Iran, with our economy ranking as the fastest growing of any European G7 country last year. Boosting opportunity and tackling youth unemployment in every area remains our priority, and through our Jobs Guarantee, we are helping young people into work while engaging employers to ensure they have the skilled workforce that they need. That article was by Jodie Harrison and read by Karen.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.